Hey, welcome to Gun Stuff. Today we get a chance to take a look at Hiperfire products. So we got a whole lineup of Hiperfire products that have come in, and we're going to start off by installing some of these on Windham Weaponry 9mm carbine, and then we're going to take them out to the range and we're going to test them. All right. So what they've sent us is they sent us their Hyperswich, which is a 60-degree throw lever. And what this does is it gives you an ambidextrous safety selector, and it moves it to where it only goes 60 degrees instead of a full 45 degrees, where it has to go from safe, flipped all the way into the fire position. So we'll be replacing that, putting that on here. We have the Hiperfire HIPERTOUCH trigger group here, and this is a very unique trigger in the fact that it uses springs to counteract some of the weight, so that you get a lighter trigger pull, and you also get a harder hitting hammer, so that you get less problems with light strikes, things like that. Solves a lot of problems and a lot of mishaps that can happen, especially when you get into shooting ammunition. You're shooting a lot of rounds down range, and you're shooting ammunition that's like range quality, things like that. That gives you a chance to get a deeper strike onto the primer to cause detonation, and it also makes the trigger a lot lighter. So it's very well engineered, but we're going to put that to the test here in a minute. And then we also have the Hiperfire Hypergripe. So this is a unique looking grip, but what it is it's basically an oversized grip that replaces your standard. And what it's meant to do is it's meant to move your hand a little bit further back and give you a wider gripping area, just more surface overall. This is, as you can see as I hold it up next to the standard A2 grip, this is a much bigger, fatter grip. And what it's meant to do is to change the ergonomics on the grip itself. And when you have a smaller grip, your finger has to move closer. If the back of your hand is closer to the trigger, you have to keep your trigger finger in a position like this, and to where it's almost like at 90 degrees, and then you're just doing little movements like this. Well, that can lead to fatigue over a long period of time, long range sessions, things like that. So what this does is this moves your hand back further, so that you're just putting the tip of the finger, or the pad of the finger, onto the trigger itself, and you're moving from this position here instead of being all the way down in here. That could help some people if you have some type of hand injuries, things like that. But one of the things they also did in making this a bigger, wider grip, as you can see all of the deep grooves that are cut in here, this is meant to be able to take a hand file, a Dremel tool, sandpaper, anything like that, and you can modify the contour of this grip. So you can take and sand a little bit out here if you want it to be a little thinner at the bottom for your pinky, so your pinky can get a little more purchase on here, or so it can wrap around a little bit. You can just take and just file that out, because they've left a generous amount of material into the grip. But the bigger grip makes it a lot easier to hold onto this gun. And very unique looking piece. When I first picked it up, wasn't necessarily sure what I thought about it, but as soon as I put it in my hand and started to think about drawing and handling this weapon, this does make this a lot easier to hold on to. So we're going to find this out here in just a little bit. We're going to change out all these pieces, and we're going to get it out on the range, and we're going to do a little testing with it. One of the things also, since we have the Hiperfire lineup, I have the Hiperfire muzzle brake on one of my rifles at home, so I went ahead and took it off, and we're going to install it on here too. So then we have the full Hiperfire complement. This is my own personal one. I really like this brake. It does a great job, I think, in diverting the gases and taking some of the recoil out of the gun. So now we're going to be changing quite a bit on this carbine. So when we're going to take it back out, we'll get a good look at it, and we'll give you our impressions on it after we shoot it. But first thing we're going to do, I'm going to start off by replacing these pieces. Okay, so we have, just to go over what we have here, we have the Windham 9mm PCC that we're going to be changing these pieces out on. We have all of our tools here. We have a wrench to change the barrel, to change the compensator. We have our trigger gauge to tell where we're at on as far as what it changes on the reduction of the trigger pull. We also have our Allen key to get the grip off. We have a couple punches to get the pins out, and a little hammer in case we need to tap on some pins here. So we're going to go ahead and get started here, and as I go through putting each piece on, we'll talk about some of these pieces and what's unique about them. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to start by what I have here is I have just a regular bench vise that I brought from home, and just to set on the table to give this thing a little weight. This isn't the optimal setup for here in the studio, but what I've done is I've just taken a magazine. Usually I have bench blocks for ARs and things like that, but I don't have a bench block for a 9mm PCC. So what I've done is I've just taken a spare Glock mag, put it in the vise, and then just using this just basically to hold it still for me while I work on the gun. So we're gonna go ahead and start here. I'm gonna move this out of the way. What we're gonna start with is we're gonna go ahead and pull the grip off first so that we can go ahead and remove the safety. And then that'll allow us to change out the safety and everything. So when you're going to take these grips off, the grips usually stay on by themselves, but this is one of the things that you always run into is flying springs. Okay, so I don't know anybody that hasn't worked on their AR that hasn't had a detent or a spring or something go shooting off, and you very well may see one here today. But these things, grips are under a little bit of spring tension from the detent from the safety selector. Okay, so I've taken this out. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull this off slowly, and there's going to be a spring in here that's going to, there we go. Oh, okay, sorry, it's on the other side. So you got the detent spring right here. So the spring usually stays inside. I'm just going to tap this right on the table and let that detent fall out. There we go. So there's my detent, and there's my spring. Okay, and that is what holds the safety selector in place. Okay, and these detents come up and hit into here. Okay, so we're going to take this and we're going to set this off to the side. We're going to replace the trigger first, and then we'll put the safety in on the way back in, just in case there's any clearance issues, because most of these triggers on ARs, now from what I understand, this trigger can be installed with the safety in place, but sometimes you can't get with the standard safety. If you're not replacing the safety selector with their own model here, you may not be able to get the trigger out unless you remove the safety selector. So that's why I just went ahead and just got it out of the way first. So let's go ahead and put this back up into my makeshift block here. All right, using a punch, I'm just going to go ahead and put a little pressure down on the hammer here, just to keep this from all coming out. I'm just pushing in that pin. I'm going to go ahead and pull that first trigger pin out, and that's going to allow me to remove the hammer and spring. I'm just going to set my old pieces over on this side of the table here. Keep them all together. Okay, now I'm going to remove the trigger itself by pushing the other trigger pin in as well. There's a couple of pieces in here. You can just put your finger down inside just to keep them all together. Really keep a little pressure on them. Pull that other trigger pin out. Now this whole trigger lifts out of the gun. As you can see, you got these pieces here. You got the sear, you got the connector. All this stuff is all in one piece. All right, so now we are able to go ahead and start the install of the Hyperfire trigger. So this is going to set in just in this position here, okay? So you have the trigger shoe that goes on here for the pad. This slides up on here and it clicks in, and you can adjust this to wherever you want. Comes with a flat trigger. I'm a big fan of flat triggers, but if you don't want the flat trigger, then, if you don't want the big pad on there, you can just run with the flat trigger. This just pulls back here. You just pull back on the back of it and it slides off. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll drop this in here, and as we're dropping it in, I'll slide this up on here, and this is really meant to spread the weight. So this trigger pad here is meant to spread the weight on your finger as you pull it across. So this is meant to distribute that as you go. So I'm going to go ahead and drop this in here, and I'm going to line this up and just go ahead and click it on in place. Now, some of the parts that come with this going to be your trigger, your hammer, you have the cam mechanism, and you have the springs, and then you have the retainer on here as well. Now I'm probably pretty sure these aren't the nomenclature that they use, but that's just what I'm calling these things for now. So they send all new replacement pins and springs in here. So it comes with two different types of springs in this package, and it comes with a green and a red. And the green is what we're going to be installing today. The green will give you a lighter trigger pull. So we're trying to make this thing run as fast as we can and make it as agile as we can. So we're going to go ahead and install the green ones. The red ones will give you a little bit heavier one if you're going to be using this in a situation where you're going to be a lot of heavy use, heavy activity on the gun, and you don't want a super light trigger pull, so that you may have to, for like a duty situation or something like that, where you don't necessarily want an ultra light trigger pull. All right, so now we're going to install the trigger. One of the things you want to do is you're going to want to pinch these two legs of the spring here, and these two legs of the spring are going to ride on top of this pin here. Okay, so you're going to pinch them together, put it in this way. Going to have to apply a little bit of tension to the spring to get it into place. Okay, so now we have the guide in there. So now we're going to follow the guide with the pin itself. Push it on through. Okay, there's the guide. So now trigger locks into place. Go ahead and pull it. It's functioning properly. Okay, so now we're moving on to the cam mechanism. All right, so this is going to go down here. This cam will only go in one way, and the way you'll insert it will be to bring it down over the hammer, slide it into the slot right there. It'll drop in, and then it can pivot on here. Okay, so it can't come out, it really can't go in any other way. You don't have enough room to be able to slide it in on the bottom, so it'll just slide over, it'll go into that groove, you'll lay it back, and it'll move freely. Okay, so now springs we're going to go with today are going to be the green springs. This is going to give it the lightest trigger pull, and this is really what we're looking for here. We're trying to soup this thing up, so we want to go ahead and get this light trigger pull on there. So we have the two springs are on the rods. Now we're going to install this end plate here, and this end plate has a little divot on it, so you can use it to push something on here if you want to use a punch or a pin or something like that to push down to get leverage if you want to use something a little bit bigger than what's provided in the package. And it also has two little ledges on here that allow the springs to seat into the pockets. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and put this on here. Going to get these springs set. As you can see, we have them sit on here, and this is just going to be pushed in and rotated down into position till it gets latches onto these hooks here. Okay, so again, this is another portion where a spring or something could come loose. So I'm going to cover this with my hand and push it down onto there. So I'm going to go ahead and compress the springs. Go ahead and push it down into position to where it locks on. Okay, so now, as you can see, you have the springs are on the rods and they're set behind these hooks here. So we have it set into this position here. We're good to go. Okay, so now we are going to install the safety selector levers. So these are slotted to only go one way. And take the provided screw, run it down in. All right, now let's flush. Take the screw to the other side. So now we're moving on to install the grip. Okay, so first thing we'll have to do is I'm going to hold this up this way, move this. So we have the oversized Hyperfire grip. We're going to insert the detent into the frame, and then we're going to insert the spring into the grip itself. So when we're lining up these spring here, you want to put it onto place the grip on and watch the spring go into the hole. Once we know it's lined up and I don't have the spring pinched, then I can go ahead and get from the top. I can push down on it. I can take and put a screw on. Okay, so now we have the full install. All right, so you can see the grips accommodate for the longer throw of the Hyperfire. Now what we want to do is we want to do a safety check of the firearm. That since we've worked on the trigger, we want to make sure that everything is working properly. So we leave the weapon on safe and we pull the trigger. The weapon should not fire, or the hammer should not go home. We put the weapon on fire, pull the trigger, and of course putting your hand up here to prevent the hammer from hitting onto this little sidewall here, or the front wall of the trigger pocket, because this is under spring tension, so it's going to hit a little bit harder. So you just want to protect that. Put it on fire. The hammer goes forward, leaving this trigger finger engaged. Go ahead and push it back down, feel it click, and hear the reset. Okay, put it back onto safe again, pull the trigger, does not fire. So that's the safety function check process for checking the trigger. So what we're going to do now is we've got the trigger installed, we have the 60-degree safety throw lever on, and we have the oversized grip. And one of the things I want to show you here is I'm not used to the 60-degree, and I really like the feel of it. This doesn't have to go all the way down, so you can, it doesn't go all the way to the 90-degree port when it goes into 90 degrees to come up. So some of your markings and stuff on your firearm may not be exact because they're used to going to 90, but this goes down, comes right back up. Real nice positive engagement. Now that we've got the trigger installed, what we want to do is we want to test the trigger pull on this. So what we're going to do is we're going to use our Layman trigger pull gauge. We're going to put it on fire, pull to the rear. All right, 2.3 ounces. So okay, so I'm going to do it again. Okay, 2 pounds, 9 ounces. Again. 2 pounds, 10 ounces. Okay, so we're just right around 2 pounds. Okay, so this is going to make for a really fast trigger. And one of the things also that I'm noticing is the distance that it has to travel is far less than the standard mil-spec trigger, which is what comes with this rifle. So when you compound that with the short pull of the trigger, along with the springs in here that make this a lighter trigger pull and give it a harder hit, this is probably going to be a very fast shooting rifle. So what we're going to go ahead and do now is we're going to install the compensator on here, and then that's going to give this thing the full Hyperfire treatment. So we're just going to go ahead and slide this out of the way. Just going to go ahead and take the thread protector off. All right, so now we're going to install the Hyperfire compensator. I'm going to be putting one shim on. You can also use crush washers and or jam nuts, and we have some of those over here as well. tighten it down. All right, go ahead and put this thing back together. Okay, so here we are. We got everything installed. Trigger feels great. Nice big pad on here, adjustable to anywhere you want it. And I'm really liking this big grip. I'm gonna have to give you my impressions on that once we get to the range and be able to run this thing. Nice short throw on the selector. So hopefully that in combination with this muzzle brake, this thing should be a really quick gun, probably gonna burn down the range. One of the other things I really like about this is this really, what it does is it also lowers your the tang of where normally when you have an AR, your hand really sits way up high in here, so that when you go to shoot, your finger has to come down. So when my finger's straight ahead, it's nice and high up in there. What that does is that brings this down for a little bit better geometry on the fact that your finger goes straight in here. That in conjunction with the fact that this weapon has this little finger placement for you to rest your finger on, it puts everything right in perfect alignment there, so that then when I come back to actuate the trigger, it's a nice, easy, straight to the rear instead of being up high and having to bring my finger usually where it rests somewhere along the magazine ejection button. Usually you have to bring it down to this position here. With this one here, it changes the ergonomics so that you're straight on. So I really look forward to shooting this thing out there. So be sure to check out our next video. We're going to take this thing out and we are going to shoot this as fast as we can. See you next time.